Imagine a world where all insects suddenly disappeared. At first glance, it might not seem like such a big deal. But just a few weeks after their disappearance, the first signs of an impending catastrophe would begin to appear. Insects are invisible yet vital participants in our ecosystem. They play key roles, from pollinating plants to controlling pest populations and processing organic matter. Their disappearance isn't just a quirk of nature. It could potentially lead to chaos, destroying the balance we rely on. The first thing farmers would notice is the absence of the familiar buzzing and a complete silence over their fields. Without pollinators like bees and butterflies, more than half of agricultural crops would be at risk. Fruits and vegetables that usually depend on insects for pollination would start to disappear, leaving empty rows behind. Moreover, storage pests like beetles, which are usually kept in check by their natural enemies, would start to spread, threatening the remaining crops. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Birds and small mammals that depend on insects as a food source would begin to go hungry, forcing them to look for alternative food sources or change their usual habitats. This would cause large-scale population movements and create new competition for limited resources. So, what will happen to the food chain, and who will actually survive in a world without insects? Our journey into this mysterious zone is only just beginning. A closer look will reveal many chilling prospects for a future without these tiny creatures. Every morning, as the sun rises above the horizon, bees and butterflies rush out to the fields and gardens. Invisible heroes who work tirelessly, never resting their wings. It is they who provide us with an invaluable treasure, the harvest. But without them, our gardens would turn into true hellish wastelands. Trees that once delighted us with their fruits would become barren, and gardens full of vibrant flowers would gradually fade, losing their appeal and color. A world without pollinators would pose a real threat of extinction to plants that depend on insects for reproduction. The absence of bees means that crops like apples, almonds, and many vegetables would not be able to bear fruit. This will not only affect the dishes we are used to seeing on our tables, but will also create a whole chain of problems for farmers who will be forced to look for other ways to ensure their harvest. But that's not all. Without pollinators, the process of photosynthesis will also become more difficult, since plants will not be able to reproduce and renew themselves effectively. This will lead to a reduction in green spaces and a deterioration in air quality. Ultimately, all of this could lead to global climate changes, since plants play a key role in maintaining the carbon balance. In such a chaotic world, farmers who are still trying to grow their crops will be forced to look for alternative pollination methods, using artificial techniques that are not always effective or economically viable. The use of such methods will also increase the cost of food products, making them less accessible to ordinary people. In a situation where once abundant fertile lands are turning into barren territories, the question of who will be able to survive in the new conditions of the food chain becomes even more pressing. Let's take a deeper look into this chaos to understand how a disrupted natural world can affect those who have come to rely on insects for their survival. In the animal kingdom, insects play an invisible yet crucial role, providing food for many other species. However, their disappearance will cause the food chain to start falling apart at the seams. Birds, bats, and many mammals, including hedgehogs and raccoons, will lose their primary source of food. Without their usual food source, a struggle for survival will begin, where the strongest will rise to the top and the weak will be pushed to the brink of extinction. But it's not just animals that will suffer. Fish that feed on aquatic insects will also be affected. Fisheries will lose one of their key resources, leading to a shortage of seafood that many people love. Water in ponds and rivers will become stagnant without those who usually clean and aerate it. This will cause algae blooms and a decline in water quality, which in turn will affect the health and population of fish. A crisis is also brewing in the plant world. Without insects that act as decomposers, dead plants and animals will decompose much more slowly. This will hinder the natural restoration of soil, and agriculture will struggle to make up for these shortages. In turn, this will impact the entire food chain, from agricultural production to the supply of food in stores. A world without insects would become a battleground of everyone against everyone. Animals would search for new food sources, adapting to the drastically changed conditions. This would trigger large-scale migrations and competition. Animal populations will become unstable, and many species will be threatened with extinction, leaving a void in the ecosystem. But if you think that's the extent of the misfortunes, even deeper chaos and destruction will be brought about by the consequences that will show up on our store shelves. The disappearance of insects could trigger a real economic storm, the consequences of which would be nothing short of catastrophic. When supermarket shelves start to empty, it will be a clear sign that the world is on the brink of an economic crisis. The disappearance of insects, although it may seem far removed from the financial market, will have a powerful impact on the economy. First and foremost, this crisis will affect the agricultural sector, which will suffer huge losses due to decreased crop yields. Farms will be forced to raise prices on the remaining products to compensate for the drop in production. In turn, this will lead to higher prices for basic foodstuffs, hitting every consumer's wallet. But this is only the beginning. Problems in agriculture will start to ripple through the economic system like waves on water. The food industry, which depends on supplies of fresh products, will face a shortage of raw materials. Manufacturers of frozen and canned foods lacking access to their usual supplies will be forced to cut production volumes or even shut down their factories altogether. Ultimately, this will lead to mass layoffs and a rise in unemployment. Other industries will not be spared these difficulties either. The export of agricultural crops will collapse, leading to a shortage of foreign currency in countries whose economies rely on international trade. This will trigger destabilization of global markets and increase tensions between countries. States will be forced to seek new sources of products and raw materials, which could become a cause of geopolitical conflicts. We should not forget about the pharmaceutical industry either, since many medicines depend on components derived from plants that require pollination. Without their insect partners, the production of these medicines will become difficult. In a situation where every sector of the economy is under pressure, the world will find itself on the brink of chaos. The situation with food and the economy is only part of the destructive consequences. The upcoming changes in the planet's biodiversity promise to be just as shocking. Without insects, the planet's biodiversity will be on the verge of extinction. These tiny creatures, invisible to the eye, play a critical role in maintaining ecosystems. They not only pollinate plants, but also help decompose organic matter, turning it into nutrients for the soil. Without them, forests and fields will lose their ability to regenerate and renew themselves. The nutrients that usually return to the soil after the decomposition of dead plants and animals will begin to accumulate, reducing the fertility of the land. This will lead to soil degradation, making it harder for new plants to grow and creating a vicious cycle of destruction. A lack of plant diversity will inevitably affect the animals that depend on them. Many species of plants and animals will disappear, unable to adapt to rapidly changing conditions. Natural ecosystems, which have developed over millions of years, will begin to collapse, losing their key participants. This will create gaps in food chains and disrupt the balance of the entire environment, which was maintained by insects. Biodiversity, which is the foundation of our planet, will begin to decline rapidly and unique species will disappear without leaving a trace. Without insects, many ecosystems will lose their natural population regulators. This can lead to overpopulation of some species and extinction of others, creating new forms of imbalance. Bodies of water will also be at risk, since aquatic insects play an important role in maintaining the health of aquatic ecosystems. Their disappearance will cause water pollution and an increase in pathogenic microorganisms, which will affect the water supply for people and other animals. The situation where biodiversity is balancing on a knife's edge requires immediate attention. Given the scale of the upcoming changes, perhaps now is the time to reflect on our relationship with nature and take a thoughtful approach to protecting biological diversity. However, in this chaos, even more unexpected consequences await us. Few people in the world realize that insects are the true rulers of nature. Their activities sustain the ecosystem, and without them, the world would change beyond recognition. These tiny creatures perform heroic work, impacting many aspects of life on Earth. Bees and other pollinators provide us with fruits and vegetables, while ants, termites, and beetles are able to decompose organic matter, returning nutrients to the soil. Their disappearance will lead to poorer soil, reduced crop yields, and a decline in food quality. The interaction of insects with the environment is not limited to just the land. They also play an important role in aquatic ecosystems, where aquatic insects are a primary food source for many species of fish and amphibians. Without them, bodies of water will lose key elements of their ecosystem, which can lead to algae blooms and a decline in water quality. These changes will not only affect nature, but will also impact our ability to manage water resources. Insects are also the primary cleaners of nature. Without them, dead plants and animals would decompose more slowly, creating a new ecological problem. Food chains would be disrupted, and some animal species would be on the verge of extinction due to a lack of their usual food sources. As a result, a chain reaction would begin, gradually leading to the collapse of the established ecosystem. But that's not all. The disappearance of insects would cause an upheaval in microbiology and medicine. Many insects are carriers of microorganisms that, although they may seem harmful, actually play an important role in maintaining the balance of the environment. Without these microbes, many natural processes would be disrupted, leading to unpredictable consequences for ecosystems and creating new challenges for science and medicine. Strangely enough, insects are our unexpected allies in the fight against pests. Every day, they take part in the battle for our crops, serving as biological controllers. Ladybugs, for example, tirelessly hunt aphids, saving our plants from devastating attacks. These predators not only help keep pest populations in check, but also contribute to maintaining balance in the ecosystem, preventing outbreaks that could wipe out entire fields. However, without such defenders, our agriculture would find itself in a difficult situation. Pests such as locusts would be able to spread unchecked, causing irreparable damage. They would devour everything in their path, leaving behind a desert instead of blooming fields and gardens. Without insects keeping them in check, crop yields would drop sharply, and farmers would struggle to ensure food security. Moreover, the decomposition of organic matter, a process in which insects play a key role, would become significantly slower. This would lead to the accumulation of plant debris and a constantly increasing number of dead animals, creating fertile ground for the proliferation of pathogenic microorganisms and the emergence of new environmental problems that we have not yet encountered. Ultimately, this could lead to an increase in diseases among both humans and animals. But it's not just agriculture and the ecosystems of forests and fields that would be affected. Global changes in ecosystems will put pressure on every link in the food chain. Losing control over pest populations will create conditions in which they can spread across the entire planet. Many animal species will be threatened, forcing us to seek new methods of protection and to adapt to new inhabitants in our gardens. Thus, insects, often seen as annoying invaders, are in fact our invisible guardians. Their disappearance would not only open the gates to new waves of pests, but also undermine the very foundation of our ecosystem's stability. In the absence of insects, the world would become a stage for a true apocalypse. Pests, once kept in check by their natural predators, would embark on a global rampage. Imagine swarms of locusts relentlessly invading farmlands, devastating fields at an alarming rate. Without the presence of insect predators to control their numbers, locusts could double their ranks, devouring everything in their path. Crops like wheat, corn, and other vital staples would be reduced to dust, and farmers would face unprecedented losses. But locusts wouldn't be the only problem. Populations of caterpillars and aphids would instantly surge, no longer fearing attacks from their natural enemies, both in the wild and on farmland. This would mean even greater challenges for agriculture and would threaten the food security of the entire world. Pests, freed from the pressure of their natural enemies, would devour not only agricultural crops but also wild plants, triggering new ecological disasters. Imagine forests and fields slowly but inexorably changing, losing their original lushness and richness. Without insects, which play an irreplaceable role in the ecosystem, such changes would be inevitable. Forests, which thrive thanks to pollinating insects and those that decompose organic matter, would gradually turn into less productive areas. Seeds, unable to find ways to disperse, would rarely sprout. Young saplings, lacking proper support and nutrients from decomposed organic matter, will not be able to survive. As a result, forests will become increasingly sparse and less diverse. The situation in the fields is no better. Without insects to control pest populations and participate in pollination, agricultural crops will be at risk. Pollen will not be transferred from plant to plant, which will lead to reduced yields. A lack of pollination will limit the production of fruits and vegetables, and farmers will face declining incomes. Without insects, the self-regulation of natural systems will become impossible, making agriculture more vulnerable to natural disasters and climate change. In the absence of organic matter decomposition, the soil loses its fertility and suffers from erosion. Fertile lands deprived of insects will no longer be able to sustain previous crop yields, dealing a blow to every link in the food chain. This creates a global crisis that requires humanity to seek new solutions. Under these conditions, forests and fields will cease to be the generous providers of resources they have been for centuries. Confronted with such an omen, humanity will face the task of rethinking its relationship with nature and seeking new survival strategies. Humankind has found itself in a situation where nature is no longer a reliable ally. Without insects to support the ecosystem, humanity will have to face a number of serious challenges. First and foremost, it will be necessary to develop innovative agricultural methods such as vertical farms and hydroponics, which can operate without traditional pollination. This will require significant resources and investments to ensure sustainable food production. Research and development in the field of artificial pollination will also be needed. Technologies capable of replacing the functions of bees and other insects will have to become a priority for scientists around the world. But that's not all. New strategies will be needed to protect crops from relentless armies of pests. Biotechnology and genetic engineering could play a key role in creating resilient plant species. In addition, adapting to changing conditions will become vital for many animals. Nature reserves and artificial habitats could provide refuge for endangered species, helping to preserve biodiversity. But all of this is impossible without international cooperation and joint efforts to protect the environment. As resources become increasingly scarce, new food sources will require the introduction of things like mass production of artificial meat and lab-grown seafood. This will help reduce the burden on traditional agriculture and maintain balance in the ecosystem. Climate changes caused by the disappearance of insects will require humanity to rebalance its energy consumption and transition to renewable energy sources. The world will be faced with the need to rethink its dependence on nature and to seek new ways of interacting with the environment. In order to survive in a world where the invisible heroes no longer stand guard over ecological balance,